Hey guys, thanks for joining us for this month's episode of Life and Leadership. Every month, we will release new content about the behind the scenes in our own lives and also talk about various leadership principles that we found to be beneficial in our life and ministry.
We're also excited to have the opportunity to talk to some of our good friends and fellow leaders during this segment of our podcast. This will help give us a wide range of perspectives from leaders that are doing incredible things in their own roles and contexts. Thanks for joining us.
So here we are on our very first episode of our Life and Leadership podcast with me and you. And it's been a crazy journey to get here. Incredible journey, but crazy journey.
Crazy.
And man, I wouldn't want to do it with anybody else, and I wouldn't want to do it anywhere else. And so we're just excited to be here and excited just to share our own life and our own leadership principles that we've discovered over the years, just individually and together. And it'd be great to bring in just different people, you know, when they come in and share their own life and leadership stuff as well.
I'm excited, really excited.
Today, we want to talk about this idea of how we got here. And, obviously, I know your story and you know mine. And a lot of people know our stories, but they've never heard it together. They've never heard you and I sharing our own stories, and maybe some stories they've never, heard, in an unprofessional setting.
Right.
And, so many people know, my crazy radical transformation, grew up, very rough family, very well-known family, drugs, alcohol, abuse, all the above. By the time I'm 14 and 16 years old, drugs and all that have taken over my life. That was completely, what my reputation was about. And then God radically transformed my life at the youth group that you went to and I went to. You were a little bit younger then. But man, like God just did that. And then, from afar, you watched me go to college. You watched me, begin to be this pastor when I moved away. You were still here in Marshfield and I was, at Olathe, Kansas. And
that was a sad day.
And Pittsburgh, Kansas and all this. And then we came back and planted the well. And, during that times, obviously, when you and I started dating and like within the well, that was incredible season of our life, always be a part of our life. But, me and Selena were leading that. So we were co-pastors and, you and Austin were a huge part of the worship. Austin was the worship leader. You were like his right-hand man or woman. And you learned so much, but man, like really it was me and Selena. And so, for so long in those years, at the 4 years or so, total of us launching that church, you were right there, but you're kind of behind the scenes as well. And, I think a lot of people, watched that and knew that you were this great leader, but you were so, you're younger, but you're Dylan's wife, but you're this great worship leader as well. And, tell people, what was your side of the story?
It's definitely a weird dynamic. I'm so thankful though, because I wasn't, at that point in time, wasn't called into ministry. But I loved being a part of the worship team. I loved being Austin's right-hand man or whatever. But I was not ready to take on the role as the pastor's wife or whatever. So I'm so thankful that you and Selena were co-pastoring together. And then I could kind of sit back and watch and learn. And still, like I said, I wasn't called yet. I think I was running away from it, but in my mind, I wasn't called yet. So I was really content, and I was happy.
Content
about it.
Or comfortable?
Maybe comfortable.
Wow.
In my mind, I was content, but it's probably more comfortable than anything.
What was like the biggest thing the Lord taught you during that season of just the well?
I think that was so, so our stories are so different. Obviously, I grew up in church and stuff, and I think that was really the season where I just had to learn that is it my faith or my mama's faith? Have an awesome family, and Selena, awesome pastor, awesome aunt. But it's my own faith, and I think that was the season really that I just had to have my own relationship with the Lord, and that's why it was great that I wasn't leading alongside in that capacity, because I wasn't ready yet spiritually either. So I think that more than anything, I just learned how to be in constant communication with the Lord and just have intimacy with Him before anyone else.
Right. So. I think like you just said, like, is it my faith or my mama's faith? You were Pastor Selena's niece. Right?
Yeah.
And you were my wife. We're not related though, I promise.
Story for another time.
So you've always been in the spotlight, but kind of the behind the scenes, for so long until now, which we'll get to in a moment. But like, what was that like? Because I know that you knew you had this calling, but then you hadn't embraced that calling, or maybe it just wasn't time yet. What was that like? You being a leader, but then kind of behind the scenes at the same time, but still yet you're in the spotlight, but it was kind of weird. What was that like?
I think I think the age thing kind of gave me my own excuse of not not feeling like I needed to step in front and not feeling like I needed to do anything. And also I think Selena being in that role made me feel like I didn't have to do anything, which, like you said, is it contentment or is it being comfortable? Which, probably being comfortable. But I think I had to get out of the thinking of that I didn't have to do something, that the Lord really was calling me to do it, Yeah. And I had to be okay with that. I think it comes down to identity too. I had to come to this place where I'm like, no, the Lord wants to use me too, just like he wants to use everyone else. So I think it was just a really big learning season.
Yeah. I mean, obviously the fruit has come from that, but I think what's funny, everywhere we go, I always throw out this cheesy joke, but like being, that's the perk of evangelism. You say a joke here, the next church hasn't heard that except for you. And
I've heard all your jokes.
Every time you laugh, because I think it's that funny, even though you don't. But I always say, and you roll your eyes, but I grew up in the hood. Maddie grew up in Briarwood, right? So the hood and Briarwood, the suburb.
Oh yeah.
And throw out that cheesy joke, but I mean, a lot of people know my story. They know the crazy, radical transformation. They know who my parents were, or are, and they know who I was before, and they knew Maddie, the Freeman girl, and all that. Mm-hmm. What was that like embracing me, my past? All of this stuff that's happened, the craziness of John and Selena taking me in their home, that was your blood family, and I'm there, we're married now. Like, so many people have heard our stories, but they've never heard the behind the scenes of you and your perspective of like, okay, like how do you take on something like that?
Right.
And what's that been like?
I think the fact that I got to kind of sit back and watch it all happen, since you kind of were a somewhat part of the family, and obviously
I was in the Christmas pictures.
Yeah, obviously weren't like an item yet or whatever. And I think the fact that I got to sit back and watch the transformation happen was crucial for us. You know what I mean? Because I think it comes down to God's grace. Do I trust that the Lord's changed your life? I've seen him do things in your life that I've not really seen in other people's lives, know? And so I never had an issue with that part of the story. I just, honestly, when I was younger, I thought you were cool, Yeah. So when I was little, I was like, oh, this is kind of a cool kid that's around now, But then, like your past and stuff, that was never an issue with me because I've sinned just like you've sinned. In God's eyes, it's the same. It's not any different. Maybe consequences worldly are different, but yeah, that's. But why do you think that?
I mean, I know it's so natural to you. Like, yeah, I'm able to forgive, but we've counseled so many people who they're dating and then they find out the past. I think like one thing, I could be wrong, but I think like one thing that might have been able to give you more grace towards me. Number one, God given. Number two, like when God changed my life, I mean, I didn't go back. I wasn't perfect, but I didn't go back to the drugs. I didn't go back to that lifestyle of all those things within. And so I don't know if that was easier for you to see, knowing I didn't grow up in the church and rebel. Would you say that's true or no?
I think that's a big part of it because obviously I've heard your story and you didn't know really any better. You didn't really see, you didn't see that growing up. You didn't know that there was a better way to live. You didn't know. And so like you said, you never went back, plugged to your book. But you didn't, and I saw that, and I saw you strive to be to be the best man of God you can be, and not only that, but I saw the boldness that came from you, and that was so refreshing seeing that because I didn't see very many guys like that when I was growing up. I didn't see, there were awesome guys in the youth group and whatever, but just you were obviously really outspoken for the bad. And then when you got saved, you were super outspoken for the good. And just watching from afar, just the revival that took place around all your friends that came and got saved and stuff, like, and me seeing that. But then me also seeing you taking that and then becoming youth pastor and doing it somewhere else. So you're not even with our family or with John and Selena anymore. You're doing it away from us and then coming back for the well. I mean, you just can't deny the power. And and if God doesn't judge you for your past and he's wanting to use you, then who am I to think, oh, well, you have this past and I don't, which, we all do. But anyway. Definitely our theme verse for marriage, Psalms 37:4, take delight in the Lord, he gives you your heart's desire. And, I think like the Lord gave us our heart's desires. I mean, I know obviously that he gave us heart's desires in each other, but the craziness of me living with John and Selena and then kind of being
integrated within your family, I think helped that stuff because
did.
and I knew what the Freeman was like. I knew
Yeah.
it Sundays.
I had
after
high
church,
standards,
right?
and you
kind of got built within that.
You did.
But I think it was so cool. Like in my book, by the way, $15, right? At dylandandmadi.com. No, I'm kidding. But
this is a plug.
No, but there's that chapter, when we talk about the two of us, where on our wedding day, July 16th, 2016.
Yeah.
What's up now, right? But so the first look, see you in your white dress, that resembles purity. Washed white as snow, right? Your sins were gone, or your sins are gone. They were before just crimson red, now they're white as snow.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's what the wedding dress resembles. I don't know if a lot of people know that, but that's what that resembles, right? And so I saw you, and I tell that story in the book of you walking down, and I'm like, man, that is God's greatest testimony of His grace upon my life. Like, you were the virgin, I wasn't, right? You're walking down the aisle, this beautiful, pure girl, right? And it's like there's no way that God's grace is that good, but it is. He gave me my heart's desire. But in the book I talk about the night before, we have rehearsal, but then you give me the little box, right? And I didn't know what the box was at first, and then I look into it as your True Love Waits box, which is essentially, correct me if I'm wrong, you explained that actually, because you went through it and I did.
So True Love Waits is when we kind of went through this series within the youth group, and Selena was awesome at it. And then it's just kind of teaching you that you want to wait for your spouse, in purity and sexually, obviously. And so then at the end of the session that we were going through, we would write a letter to our future spouse saying, I'm waiting for you in every regard, and I'm praying for you, and all kinds of stuff. So anyway.
Yeah. So that night before our wedding date, you gave me that, and you had 4 different ones. And I remember reading that, and you're like, to whom I marry, I'm saving myself for you, yada, 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 right? And so there I was in a Walmart parking lot, it's like a country music song, reading your True Love Waits box. But then there was that one, and then the next one, and the next one. And it's the older you got, the more is you were planning on marrying me, dreaming that. So it'd been really awkward if you didn't marry me.
I know. I would have been,
But man, I remember just just bawling my eyes out, just dude, God's grace upon my life. I don't deserve that, but that's never been an issue with you, just grace, and I see a lot of people who do struggle with the grace of God, and rightfully so, in some regards. But, I think that is just something that has been God given to you, for you to be able to extend that grace. And I know when we travel and we speak and you sing, I've seen you talk to people of just, they want to know, hey, what was that grace look,
right.
How are you able to give that grace? And I know people within your, your close knit of friends and family have asked you that. And so I think that's powerful, know, and what would you tell people who, they're trying to extend grace to maybe someone they like, they have a tainted past,
right.
but then they've changed, but you're trying to, show them love. Some people, I think they're trying to figure out if the person really has changed or not.
Right, which that's a different conversation,
right.
kind of. But
what would you say to people? How do you, you already hit on the grace of God, and so, that really is it. But if somebody is struggling, and they see us, they hear our story, they see the ministry today, but man, they just really just have a hard time getting over someone's past. What do you say about that?
So I say I've fallen short so many times that some people know about and some people never know about. You know what I mean? But the Lord knows, and I sure hope that and know that He forgives me.
Right.
And if He shows me the forgiveness, then I'm going to show somebody else that same forgiveness, because grace is grace is grace is grace. That's my motto. Grace is grace is grace. And if I expect, I know that God shows that to me, then that means that God shows that to you and someone else too. And surely to goodness, I can show that to somebody else,
That's powerful, man. I think what's crazy, so we're at the well, and I believe it was 3 years of it actually being in existence. And then, man, God began to just break my heart for something else. My timeline could be off, but I remember the Lord just bringing back to my mind. I was 18 years old. I just graduated high school. I was at Nazarene Youth Convention 2011. And Francis Shane was speaking, and man, I had no idea what I was going to do with my life, but I was praying, and I remember God just telling me, Dylan, you're going to do this. It wasn't about the big stage. He did, and I felt like he was going to give me influence, but it wasn't about the stage, but it was about, so many people around watching Francis Chan, and just simply him telling his story and how it just radically just, changed him and his family's life forever. And I remember God just telling me, Dylan, this is what I'm calling you to. And I knew it was evangelism. I didn't know what evangelism really, was outside of just personal evangelism, but I felt like he called me to that. Well, I mean, he brought me through the hoops, went to college, went to be a youth pastor, and I believe he took me through the hoops for so many different reasons, to grow in leadership and all that. But this time of the well, I'm very young, fastest growing church from the Church of the Nazarene. Me and Selena planted it together. I was a primary preaching pastor. I mean, all was going well. Like, you are an idiot on paper if you want to leave.
Right.
And I wasn't just wanting to leave, but God just kept bringing back this evangelism thing. Yeah. And just, it was almost, I felt like preparing my heart, but I'm like, how is this ever going to work? And I remember, not telling you for a long time that I was just getting restless. And
I knew you were getting restless. Right. I knew it.
And I was trying to hold it because I didn't know what to say. It wasn't like I wasn't trying to hide anything. I just didn't know what to say. And like with Selena, being my godmom and then co-pastor, how would that transition even work? But I remember, I just was going through a lot with family as well, and so many different things. And I remember just kind of getting down in the dumps. And there was that week or two, I wasn't normal. I was going through a hard time when we were eating Chinese food.
The most depressing conversation we've ever had. It was horrible.
I'm an optimist, but man,
I know.
But we were sitting there, and I said, Mad, outside of Jesus, you're the only thing in my life right now that is bringing me satisfaction. You're bringing me happiness.
It's a lot of weight to put on my shoulders.
You looked at me, but I'm like, I love you though, I promise.
But glad. It was good to hear that.
Yeah, and it wasn't because someone might hear this and like, but the well was great, and no, it had nothing to do with the well. It was just, I wasn't living in what God. Right. That's not true. I was living what God called me to at that point in time, but I knew God was preparing me.
Else was coming.
He was making me restless, but I had to recognize those emotions in order to really release or get my mind in that place of like, hey, maybe. And I remember just like going home, and I would start talking, and you're like, yeah, because people don't know you. I mean, you're smiley, you're laughing, all the time, but like, you're not about change, you're not about all that.
I hate change.
And so when I would tell you this, like, what was going through your mind? Like, just like briefly, I mean, like when I was like, babe, I feel like evangelism is going to be there. You're thinking what, like 10 years, 30 years down the road, or what?
Yeah. I thought, down the road that maybe that would happen someday after whatever. But when you told me that, I was like, okay, well, good luck.
Yeah.
I'll see you when you get home.
Right. And so I remember like there was like a week went by, 2 weeks went by, and I just knew like, man, I don't think this is long term, like down the road. Or, I don't think it's like a long waiting thing. I feel like it's sooner what we can imagine. Right. Granted, on paper,
way sooner.
Terrible timing. We're about to plan our second campus, and all of that. I mean, why would you change anything? But we could literally tell 1,000 stories of affirmation of how God began to do this. But I remember, within all these just little affirmations, like micro affirmations, I remember, we were at the Awakening prayer conference, and Dan Bohai was speaking, and he was talking about love. Had nothing to do with evangelism. Yeah. I mean, he was an evangelist, so the skeptic would say, well, you saw an evangelist speaking. Right. But he was talking about love, and we were sitting there with our whole staff and spouses, and you were there, with me, and I mean, clear as day, God said, it's now. Like, it's now, and I'm like, yes, Lord. And then by the end of it, I'm like, there's no way, Lord, right? But I remember looking at Selena, and like God, speaking to her, and had no idea what it was about, but I just remember like, man, God is really like, it pressed this upon my heart. And then you and I went out in the car, and we just had like an hour conversation of just like, I think, babe, like, I think it's sooner than later. And I could tell you're like swallowing, like,
yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Because at that point, I could feel that for you. At that point, I was like, gosh, yeah, it's happening.
God bless you. I'll see you later.
Now.
Right.
Right.
No, but I mean, I remember looking at you, I'm like, because I knew up to this point, it was always, the well and me and Selena, but then like evangelism, that's a whole nother step of faith, and that would affect you. But I remember us leaving that conference, and we had conversations with Selena, and just said, hey, like, I don't know, here's what the Lord's, kind of revealing. But I mean, so we had 100 affirmations after that, but I remember really one of the major defining moments, for me, it was a Friday night, and Friday night is our date night. Every single week since we've been married. I know we don't have kids, but we either go eat, and we definitely go eat.
We
always eat. And binge watch something.
Yeah.
But man, I remember we went and ate, and we came back home, and we're laying down watching TV. And clear as day, the Lord's like, go to redemption, because our redemption services are on Friday night. I didn't, usually go to that because that was my day off, and I would go occasionally, but that night I knew I was supposed to go. Our district superintendent within the Church of the Nazarene was there, and I'm like, I don't want to go. Like, this is our date night, and I just knew the Lord said, I have a word for you. So I go, and the first song they sang was Oceans, and you want to sing a song for us real quick, Matt? No,
yeah,
I'm joking.
Sure.
And man, those lyrics got to me. But the whole service goes by, and it was great. But that was it. I'm like, Lord, I thought you had a big word for me.
Right.
And, but then like that was kind of the end of the service. We said, we're going to sing one more song. And it was Oceans again. And man, the only way I can express this, like when I got saved, and then when God called me to plant the well, man, his glory, man, the weight of his just glory fell upon me. And I just wept. And I can be charismatic. I can be, super dynamic or whatever you want to say, but like I'm not a super vocal guy.
Right. You're not a weeper.
Prayer. Yeah, I'm not. But man, I just was right there, just weeping, and Pastor Selena's husband John, my best friend, father figure, and all that was right there, and he knew like that night, like, okay, he's about to leave. And I came home, and I just word vomited on you.
Yeah,
just threw it all out there. And like, what was your mind, like in your mind right then? Like, what was going through your mind?
I don't even know what was going through my mind. I was just, like I said, I could see it coming for you. I could see it coming. So when you came home from redemption and just blurted it all out, I just was thinking about all the things that were going to change and that weren't going to be the same. And I was kind of freaking out for a little bit because I'm like, gosh, like nothing is going to look the same in my life.
Right.
And at that point I was going to keep doing the same thing, but even just you doing evangelism was just going to change everything.
Right.
I was
because you were in school to be a teacher. You're almost done.
Yeah.
And I remember when me and you and Selena and Brandon and John all had the meeting.
I forgot about that.
At the well, and just like that's when we knew like this is gonna happen.
Yeah.
And we tell so many stories, just crazy stories. But then like we knew like, hey, like I'm transitioning, and I remember the day that we went and talked to your parents and tell them like, hey, like Lord's. I was like, Lord, you're gonna have to speak to them, And I remember one of the first things your mom said was, "Yeah, I kind of figured you guys would start doing this."
Yeah.
And I'm like,
they didn't think now.
Yeah. But at that point in time, I think they still thought you would finish school.
Yeah. At that point in time, I wasn't changing a thing.
Right. I was gonna do this, and you were gonna join me when you could. But still had a lot of affirmation about, this is what God had for us. But we stood before the church, and everybody thought we were going to announce that we were going to have a kid.
And we were matching that Sunday too.
Okay, first of all, people might say, why would you wear a white sweater, Dylan? Because I wanted to wear a white sweater, and it was trendy.
And you left before I woke up, so it's not like I saw you.
So we're about to announce to the entire church, we're about to leave. And then Maddie comes in, black, and then white sweater. Yeah. Exactly what I was wearing.
Literally wearing the exact
outfit. And I look
outfit.
at her, I'm like, what are you doing?
You were mad at me. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, because you should have known that I was wearing that, right?
You left before I was awake, so.
But.
Anyways.
So you get up there, and so probably what people are thinking, okay, they intentionally,
match.
Though that happened,
yeah.
Periodically. Even though I get ready first, and then you copy what I wear every time.
Sometimes that does happen, but I was asleep.
Anyways, but I'm sure people are thinking, oh my gosh, they're going to reveal a third sweater. And it'd be
that actually is a good idea.
It just came to me right there.
That's a cute idea.
Right, it just came to me right there. Right.
We'll keep that.
But so we had the third sweater, but that wasn't it. And so as soon as we said she's not pregnant, everybody went.
And then they were like, okay, what is this announcement?
Crap. And so I remember just like there's a picture, and we're like Selena's praying, and I'm like crying, and then Maddie,
my eyes are open.
Going, oh crap!
My eyes are so wide. I'm like trying not to cry and also freaking out.
And so like we just started off on that, like on this journey. But I remember so at that point in time, it was Dylan Robinson Ministries because God hadn't called you that. You were going to be a teacher. You were still going to lead worship whenever you wanted. at the well, but also
Right.
with the ministry. So that was the plan. But I remember I was speaking at a youth conference in Wichita, Kansas, and I got done, and it was late, and I was going back to the hotel, and like clear as day, the Lord said, Maddie's called to do this full time. And clear as day, I said, well, good luck, big guy. You're going to have to speak that to her.
He hadn't told me that yet.
And it was super sarcastic because I'm like, yeah, I ain't telling her that because, man, if I tell her that, like, number one, like, it's going to interrupt her calling. It's going to end up, just causing her all this confusion. So, Lord, you're going to have to speak that. And so I remember not saying anything to you because I'm like, God, if this is you, like, you got to speak this. And I remember I was getting ready and I was getting ready and then you were gone. You're supposed to be gone.
Yeah.
Right?
I think I called you.
Okay. Well, I was getting ready and you called me and said, babe, I'm not supposed to teach. You tell that story. Because I remember being like, oh my gosh.
Right. So I was in my student teaching meeting, which is how close I was to being done. Because like I had a semester left of classes and then a semester of student teaching. And so they just start the process early. So I was sitting at Missouri State in a meeting with a bunch of other people who were going to be teachers or whatever. And I was sitting there and they're just like talking about the process of all kinds of stuff and where you want to do student teaching and blah, blah, blah. And I got so sick to my stomach and my head started pounding, my heart started pounding. And I was like, why do I feel like I'm going to throw up right now? Because it wasn't like I had to speak. It wasn't like I was like a nervous feeling. Like I was just sitting in the meeting with a bunch of other people. But, I felt horrible. And then I just, not audibly or whatever, but the Lord was like, yeah, you're not supposed to be doing this.
Right.
I was like, but I'm really close to being done and
Right.
I want to finish. And I thought I wanted to be a teacher. And he's like, no, you're going to travel with Dylan.
Right.
I'm like, okay.
Right.
So that's when I literally left the meeting early. I didn't even finish the meeting. I didn't even take the paperwork because I was like, that would be disobedient at that point. So I just left. And as I was walking to my car, I called you and I'm like, here's the deal. I'm not supposed to do this anymore.
Right.
And I think one of the first things you said were like, okay, tell your parents, you know?
Good luck.
Yeah. So, but anyway, and you didn't tell me obviously about the Wichita thing. You didn't say a word about that. I mean, it was clear as day, the Lord saying,
Crazy.
Yeah. It was a crazy moment.
I remember, you came home and I was like, well, you're going to have to tell your parents because I didn't want them thinking I'm just hijacking this plan.
You're like forcing me to do it. Yeah.
And I mean, they helped out with your college,
Yes.
completely.
Yes.
And it's like, oh, by the way, I'm not going to finish
I'm
that degree.
quitting.
And so I remember we went over there and you told them that and they're like, yeah, sounds good. I'm like,
I
what?
couldn't believe
like,
their
I'm
reaction.
sorry, y'all, getting a little bit older, maybe you didn't hear us, and then, man, they were so supportive. And
So
they've been so
supportive.
supportive this entire time. But
Every time we've told them a big step of faith, like crazy plan,
Right.
they've been like, yeah, okay,
Crazy.
I can see that. That's a good idea.
And like for me though, that was a big thing. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
God's in this. And I had so many other people who I was kind of nervous to reach out to, and
Right.
who were kind of critical thinkers in a good sense, but they're like, yeah, I totally, see that. And I told my wife the other day that, I felt like you were called to evangelism. So I remember, you and I, we sat down, and financially, it's a huge step of faith.
Yeah.
When you're a church, at the end of the day or at the end of the week, you're going to preach, right?
Right.
You got your church. And,
Yeah.
but I remember, people began to find out that, I was going to do this. When I say I mean, because it was Dylan Robinson Ministries, because you hadn't felt called to that yet. I was going to do this. They're like, basically, what are you doing, idiot? And it was like, seriously what they, said. And I remember one kind of big pastor, was like, Dylan, like, but you're so good at what you're doing now. And you're so good at what you do. And I just, I was politically correct, if you will, and went through that whole conversation, said what I was supposed to. But I remember just saying, but I'm not. Meaning, like, God called me to plant a church, and therefore he equipped me to plant a church. I couldn't speak before, God called me to ministry. He allowed me to speak. I couldn't lead before, but God allowed me to lead.
Right.
And so I remember just thinking, no, like, matter of fact, if I keep operating in my own, doing my own strength, it's going to go downhill real quick, and I'm going to prohibit what God's wanting to do through the well. So I just remember that, walking through all that stuff with you. And then once we set out, to do Dylan Robinson Ministries, like immediately you're a huge part of it. I mean, at the first,
Surprisingly, because I didn't even think I would be.
yeah, I mean, the first event, they wanted you to speak. It wasn't even
lead worship, not speak.
Yeah. I was saying you preached, but
that'd be interesting.
But I remember, like, I didn't even have to, promote you that much. It was just like they wanted you to do it because they knew you, and they had heard you.
I had helped with a women's conference there before.
But I remember that first one, and just be real, awesome church, and But I remember, like, it was a 3-day event, and the Sunday morning there's a variety of people there, but the first 2 nights there's few people from their church and a lot of our family. And a lot of the leadership. And I remember just looking around, I'm like, God, are you sure you called us to this?
Right.
But man, like, we had to make up our mind right then and there, like, are we going to trust God or not?
Right.
And, here we are a year later, since this evangelism, and like, what a ride it's been.
Crazy.
I mean, he's come through and through every single time. But like early on when it was just Dylan Robinson Ministries, you and I were still part of it together, but it was really me. You were subbing on the side. So you were subbing, which is being essentially a teacher fill-in.
Yeah.
And you're about to complete your degree to be a teacher.
Yeah.
Talk about that. I mean,
that was hard.
Humbling. Talk about it.
Oh, humbling
and you
for
still
sure.
do it at times.
I mean, all the teachers that you sub next to, and then all the kids too, even like 2nd and 3rd graders, they're like, are you going to be a teacher? And having that conversation literally maybe 3 times a day, like 3 times every time I subbed. Well, I was, and then I'm not now, and I'm
a stupid husband.
Yeah, stupid. Yeah, that's how I know. I didn't word it like that, but it was hard because at that point I didn't even know why I was doing it, because I still wasn't called into ministry at that point, and I was doing events with you, but I had not came to this point in my life where I'm like, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do. Right. It was just like the Lord told me to go with you. Yeah. So answering that question every time was so hard. Like, my husband travels, and so I travel with him, kind of thing. And subbing's the perfect job for that. Blah blah blah. But answering that all the time, it was hard because that's what I was wanting, what I thought to do at the time, and knowing I was so close to doing it, and seeing all these young teachers who had just graduated and gotten jobs and stuff, and that would have been me in a year. Right. So it was definitely a hard season. It was definitely a humbling season. But it was worth it now.
Why do you think the Lord, why do you think the Lord had you do that? I mean, you're almost done being a teacher. Then, hey, actually, I want you to follow Dylan. But we did it together. But, it was really me, my face, or the ministry. And then you went right back to the school where you graduated to. Yeah. And then you're subbing and not being a teacher. I mean, a lot of people, they wouldn't humble themselves to do that.
Right.
Number one, why did you think the Lord did that? Number two, what was the biggest takeaway you've learned from that situation?
Right. So, one, obviously humbling. I mean, we all need humbled a time or two, and so that's definitely why. But also, I mean, a lot of it was on me. I think in the back of my mind, I knew that I was called to this with you, but I was running from it. I didn't want to. I didn't think I was supposed to at the time, but kind of was starting to feel the pull to ministry, but just didn't know how it would look like. And I think a lot of that was on me. I wasn't letting God do it yet. I was scared. I was like, no, I'm not doing it. And so, I think that mixed with the humbling was kind of why I had to go through that season.
Right. So when do you think that point was when you knew that God had called you, to ministry? Like, when do you think that was?
That's hard to say. So I say all the time that the Lord speaks to me and you very differently. The Lord can give you kind of a big picture and you'll kind of run with it. But like you said earlier, I hate change. Right. And so the Lord kind of speaks to me with baby steps. Right. And so the first step was quitting school and traveling with you. The next step was leading worship at some churches, which just kind of happened. It wasn't like I was asking for it, but the Lord used that. And then it was, okay, I am called to do this, but I still wasn't ready for like a name change or anything because I still wasn't called in a ministry or whatever. But, and then there just came a point where, and it wasn't a specific day. It was kind of gradually throughout this year where the Lord's like he kind of asked me, like, not audibly, but was like, why not? Why don't you want to do this? Why won't you let me do this? Yeah. And like I said earlier, a lot of it was identity. A lot of it was, I can't do this. This isn't what I'm called to do. Like,
well, even though you're doing it already, a lot of people would validate you. Why do you think, like, cognitively, like, you just couldn't wrap your mind around it because it wasn't your original plan, or?
Maybe because it wasn't my original plan. I just, honestly, I think it's because I didn't believe that much in myself quite yet.
Yeah,
You know, I think a lot of it was identity. I think a lot of it was, and honestly, like you being married to you is kind of, it's obviously amazing, but it's,
If you have to preface it with that, something else is coming.
you know what I mean? But it's kind of like Dylan does that. Why would I ever, And I think that was a lot of it too. It was almost like my own insecurities, being in your shadow because I put myself there, not because you put me there, because the Lord put me there, because I physically put myself there. And so I think a lot of it was thinking, well, I can't ever be like him, and then my relationship with the Lord will never be, which they're different, and it's, you know what I mean? And so a lot of it was my insecurities.
Right. And I always made sure to put you first,
you
and
always
all that.
did.
But I think that's good for people to hear is like, well, how come it wasn't Dylan and Madi from the beginning?
Right.
Because
you wanted it to be.
Yeah.
I mean,
And I remember we had conversations and you just weren't ready yet. But I think I think was pretty powerful is I remember there was that time when I could just tell in your spirit, you're getting frustrated. You're getting frustrated to go and sub, and you would go sub, and I'm at home working, on sermons and all ministry related. You're going to school, finding half days and full days to sub, and being a trooper, and you loved it. Being a substitute is awesome, but I could tell you're getting frustrated. And then I was wondering what was going on, and you were being sweet, but I just remember the Lord just kind of showing me, I'm like, she's getting frustrated at her calling.
Yeah.
And that's when I said, babe, like, listen, you haven't said anything to me. You haven't done anything that was really, bad or anything. But I'm like, I'm recognizing that strain, that frustration is the fact that you're called to something else, but you've got to verbalize that, And I remember you go, well, I'm doing this. I'm like, no, like, there's one thing of like, I might be called to like, no, God
just
has called me to the ministry,
and
I've got to go through the hoops. And granted, some people, there's bivocational ministry. There's some people who, they're in full-time ministry. There's some people who, just feel to lead in the church. But like, if God has put that full-time, calling upon your life, you've got to accept that.
Right.
And so I remember, like, just as we were doing this, I'm like, well, let's start outlining the ministry. Like, let's look at the website. Let's look at our identity. And, we're very thorough in all that we do and intentional. And it's like, and then I just began to look, I'm like, okay, since the beginning, we began to make changes of where it was just Dylan Robinson Ministries, but then we put your picture here and we'll book Dylan and or Madi and all these things. I'm like, this thing is set up to be Dylan and Madi.
It was, for sure.
And so I remember once you just kind of acknowledge that call, full time upon your life, then it made it real clear of like, man, like let's go out and do this. And so, it's of recent when we've, made that switch from Dylan Robinson Ministries to Dylan and Madi Ministries, and it just fits, man. It just like, it's like, that's what we intended to do. That's what we wanted. And so I think that's important because, some people, I think people hear my story and they know the radical transformation and all this. And then he's called a ministry and doing this and this, but man, like to hear Madi grew up, not in the hood, but Briar Wood. Right. And then I'm going to be a teacher. This is my plan. I'm a Freeman, now Robinson. Right. So being a Robinson really messes things up. Right. But see, like, it was like you were surrendering your plan. And I think as a process of that, and I think, people who listen to this can be inspired of like, okay, maybe I don't have to have it all figured out, because, there are some people who they've told me since they were, freshmen in high school or middle school, I'm called to ministry, and they even went to ministry school, and then they're out of the ministry. Right. I'm not the judge of why that is, but then there's someone like you who you went through the hoops and you're almost done. With your degree, and then God said, nope, I want you to do this. Like, that shows me humility, and it shows me perseverance in a whole new way. Because if God asked me to do that, I'd be like, dude, like, why not? Why couldn't you have said this at the beginning, right? And all this money, but man, I think that's, so powerful. And I think like, since we've done this, it's just been incredible, just to watch us come together and do it. And, I think when we go, since we've been going out in these different churches and God's continued to open up opportunities and put us on, bigger platforms, having just the two of us right there together is just, been special.
Yeah, very special.
So now that we're Dylan and Madi Ministries, right? A year plus a month, we're in a whole nother faith journey, a whole nother, season. People ask us, how is it, what's it like being evangelism? And I said, get back to me in a few years.
Right.
Because, the first year is kind of like the honeymoon season, obviously in the marriage you have a day, but they call it the honeymoon season where that original high, that original, euphoria will go away. But, I think within ministry and evangelism, I mean, this is unknown territory. And even if you've been an evangelist before, you've never led in 2020. Like this is new ground. And so, I think for us, we've embraced the name change. You're starting ministry classes in the fall. That's a big deal. I'm excited about that. I'm so excited for you to have to type all those papers that I had to type.
Yeah, I'm thrilled.
But man, like we've had some ups and we've had some downs. We've had a lot of wins more than challenges, but there's still been challenges. And I think a lot of times we live in an Instagram world. Look how awesome this is. But really, if you look at the whole picture, it was messy. And I think with this whole journey, it's been amazing. I think the transition from the well to evangelism has been amazing. It's been hard, for so many people. The congregation, the leadership, me and Selena, we're doing great. The staff is great. But there's that, there's that transition period where it's a little bit difficult. I feel like we've all kind of gotten over that hill, and now I feel like this is where it's like brand new territory. Right. Here we go. We had that year. We've had incredible opportunities. I mean, we've got to be at some amazing churches and had some big events, but I know it's just been beat over the drum, time and time again with COVID-19, but it's what we live in right now. And people have asked me like, man, how's it impacted you guys? And so if you're a church, you still have church, even if it's, through technology, if it's through live stream and all that stuff. With us though, if you're an evangelist, what do you do? Yeah. And so I remember, anybody and everybody was doing the live stream, and some were doing it well and some not so well. And I'm like, man, I don't want to just do a video just to put it out there. And it's like, well, we're not pastors. I mean, I guess I technically am, but like, we don't have a church to oversee. And so,
and we don't want to take away from Sunday morning services. Church from someone else. Right. Yeah.
So what do we do? And I remember it was probably 2 weeks into this of not having church. Your parents were like, you guys need to do this. And we're like, yeah, maybe. And then Selena messaged like, man, people really want to hear from you. And so we're like, okay. And to this point in time, I mean, just to be real, I mean, we have gotten, I've gotten several opportunities to be a pastor elsewhere. Some we've considered, some we haven't, but each time the Lord's like, no, that's not what, I've called you guys to do. So we've turned those down. And, one particular church recently, when we knew that God wasn't having us go there, that's how I knew he was just getting started in evangelism. Right. Like, man, he's about to do a whole new thing. And then COVID-19 happened, right? Yeah. And so you and I were sitting there and we're like, what do we do? Right. And, I kind of wrote a little article on it. It was saying like, limitation can equal innovation, right? I know it's a cliche, but it's real. Like you can either say, oh, poor me, or man, you get innovated. Right. And there's been some things we need to do behind the scenes that we haven't done just because we've been traveling and preaching and singing and leading in those capacities. And so I remember, we just sat down and we just began to just dream, just be big dreamers. And, Mark Batterson and Circle Maker, and just going through some of those principles and like, okay, like God's not surprised that this is going on. And he did not create this opportunity to go to this amazing church to just have this evangelism, just go downhill. I mean, he didn't present this opportunity and say, don't go, and then just have us here for no reason. And so, man, we sat down with our friends, Stephen and Emily Rippey, who we love. And man, God just met us there that night and just began to just dream about this podcast and another podcast and a weekly, midweek message and worship. And, we've launched all these things, but man, like we had to take a big step of faith financially. We had to begin to get super creative. And so, I think a lot of people see all the sexy, glamorous things that people present, but they don't know the behind the scenes of how scary that is. But like, so for you, you could have had this job, I could have had this church, and now we're in the evangelism where there's no guarantee. We've lost, huge events. I mean, I know that my biggest event of this entire year at a university was canceled, and, some big events. But man, like I had faith, I had hope, through that all. But I mean, what's been your mindset? And I mean, what would you tell people, when you man, how are you guys handling this right now? And why are you guys so optimistic? What would you say about that?
Right. I think, I mean, it all comes down to faith. I mean, and I feel like that's also the hardest thing about evangelism. And then, of course, COVID-19 is the faith part. But then it's like you get to see God just move and just do so many things. And this whole first year, I mean, if we've been afraid about something, or if something just doesn't seem to work out on paper, I mean, the Lord just does it. He's just so faithful and has just always been right there with us. And so it's the faith aspect is hard, and it's hard spending money on and stuff to get things like this started in a time where, I mean, we don't even, it's so unknown right now, but it's also like just the other day we got to see God just come in and do something crazy, you know?
I want to talk about that just because it's real life. I mean, this isn't Dylan and Madi Ministries and God is so great and everything's great. Like, it's real life, man.
It is, yeah.
And we took this big financial step, for equipment and things of that nature. And we knew it was a big step of faith, but like, I remember telling you before all this, I'm like, I'm so done doing what we've been doing. Right. Like, it's time to get innovative.
Yeah.
And so when, the Rippies were over and God just really met us, we began to just brainstorm about some ideas. And we had this big step of faith and vision came. And, but man, I remember when we took that step, then you have the aftermath of, oh crap.
Oh no.
Like here we go.
What did we just do?
Yeah. And I remember, so this was last week. I woke up and I don't watch TV unless it's like you and I, like date night or at night, if we're just.
I was shocked when you turned the TV on without me.
But like, I turned the TV on because it was like a poor me. Yeah. I'm like, man, I don't know what's going to happen. My events are getting, canceled. Maddie's are getting canceled. Took this big financial step and I'm going to just get lost in TV. And I remember the Lord just saying, like, you can do that or you can run to me.
Right.
And man, I opened the Word and I began to pray. And I felt so compelled to reach out to some of my intercessors, just people who pray on behalf of us all the time. I think it was like 4 or 5 of them. And I didn't even tell you I texted them.
No.
And I just said, I wasn't super specific, but just vaguely like, hey, we've been impacted like everyone. Our hopes are high, we got good faith. However, we've taken a big step of faith and, financial faiths. We just pray for us. We didn't say numbers. We didn't say anything like that.
Just financial.
But there was, a number we knew that we needed bad to really just help us cover some of the stuff that we got and all that. And so I sent it out and people were like praying. The very next day, I'm getting ready, which cracks me up. It's like
you're always getting ready.
I'm getting ready. People are judging me right now, right? I'm getting ready. And you walk in with a check
with a picture of a check. We didn't have it yet.
A picture of a check of someone who's not given their ministry directly before for the same exact amount and a larger amount. And I just was sitting there and I was like, or standing there, I'm like, God, only God, man. And I would love to say that happens every time. Right. However, he has done that time and time again for us, but like he's faithful. Yeah. And I preach on it all the time. God's faithfulness in the past gives us hope for the future. But man, when it sounds for a good sermon, but when you're in the middle of it, it's like,
it's hard.
Like David, it teetered out, Lord, why have you forsaken me? But like, then he does it. And you're literally in awe of like, that's my God, man. Yeah. Like, and dude, it's not my reputation. It's not yours. It's his.
The Lord.
Like, Lord, if you told us this, I'm banking on you right now with everything I got. Would you come through? And then, like, because we weren't texting those people, oh, please feel sorry for us. Give us money. It was like, we pray. Yeah. The very next day, I remember one person said, well, that was fast,
Right.
And, but here's the deal. Give us today our daily bread has a whole new meaning, not just financially, events or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so, okay, boom, that came in to cover this stuff. How about next month? Oh gosh, I don't know. Man, we just got to trust the Lord. Yeah. And everybody's been impacted. I mean, the small business owners, everyone has been impacted, and we got to just have our faith in the Lord and just trust him in that. And I think, going forward, once this gets back to normal, we pray it doesn't get back to normal as far as, our dependency on God and connection with people. But man, I'm praying that God just does a revival in our country unlike ever before. And I think during this time of, us using technology, just doing things that we know we need to do, it just, why would we do that now and take that step financially when we have all this? Right. But I think the things we do now will propel us, going forward. But I I don't know. I mean, that's kind of my side of that. And I think like for you, going forward, like what are some of the biggest things that, you believe the Lord will do? And what do you think that, I mean, I know we have no idea what the future holds, but like, what would you tell people who are sitting right now and they're like, man, God's called me to this, but this COVID-19's happening or man, like, I took this step of faith and it's just not really looking like I thought it would. What would you tell people?
You just got to take it one step at a time. Yeah. Just do I've heard people say this, just do the next right thing that you know for sure the Lord has called you to do,
right?
And go for it. And if He's called you to do something, you take the first step and you don't hear anything else, like we're trying to do right now. Be innovative. Right. Figure out ways that you can accomplish God's goal.
Yeah, that's good.
To the best of your ability. Yeah. And that's where we're at right now.
That's good. And I think not trying to be so smart. Like there's a difference between a good idea and a God idea. But man, like sometimes you can get innovative, but if God hasn't called you to do it, it's not going to work.
Right.
With this, it wasn't like, let's get some equipment. No, like, listen, we're not trying to build our name. It's God's, but man, He's called us to this ministry and we got to be good stewards of that. Right. We've got to be able to do whatever we can to enhance it. But man, it's been an incredible first episode of Life and Leadership with Dylan and Madi. And man, I'm excited each week, each month to just come back and just share what the Lord's, teaching us and share stories of how I've, just scared you and just annoyed you this past week.
Yep.
Yeah, scared you yesterday. But man, we're excited not only just to hear from us, but other people.
Yeah, I'm so excited. So next month, come back, join us. We're gonna have a guest and just get to know their life and leadership story also. So I'm excited.
When you hear people's stories and other perspectives and other contexts, it just helps you see a 360-degree angle of leaders, and we're all different. There's Dylan and Madi. And then there's other people, and what
they're doing works, and people want to hear about it.
Exactly, and they think different than we do, and pray and hope that this podcast builds you up in your faith.
Yep.
Thanks for joining. Make sure to subscribe to this channel so that these episodes are sent to you each month, along with our This Is My Story podcast that shares someone's story of transformation through Jesus.
Also, check out our midweek message and worship podcast that's released every Thursday. Thanks for hanging out with us.